The sound of wood splintering snapped me out of my coffee, and when I stepped outside, all I could see was dust, a wrecking excavator, and 3 HOA board members in folding chairs watching like it was a 4th of July parade. And right where my dam had stood, gone, obliterated. Karen was even wearing a sash that said, "Water belongs to the HOA." I just stood there barefoot in my flannel pajama pants, blinking at the backhoe claw that had just destroyed the one thing protecting all of them from Mother Nature's wrath. They say you never truly know your neighbors until you build something they don't understand. For me, that moment came the summer after I finished constructing the dam. It wasn't some big concrete monstrosity, just a carefully engineered, reinforced earthen dam with a stone retaining wall and a manually operated sluice gate that I installed with my own 2 hands over the course of 3 years. Every rock, every timber, every sandbag was placed with purpose, born from hours of hydrology reports, erosion surveys, and conversations with my late uncle, who happened to be a retired Army Corps engineer. My land sits at the top of a ridge overlooking the Oak Hollow Estates, a prim and proper HOA-governed labyrinth of cul-de-sacs and beige vinyl homes with flower beds regulated to 2 types of mulch. What most of those folks never bothered to realize is that their entire development is built in a natural floodplain, one that used to flood like clockwork every 5 to 7 years before I bought the property and redirected the runoff through a controlled channel system. My dam was the final piece, designed to hold back the seasonal rain surge and release it slowly through spillways and French drains. It worked like a charm. The funny part, they didn't even know the dam existed for the first 2 years it stood. But the minute Karen moved in and got herself elected HOA president, she started noticing things, like the fact that her mulch wasn't washing away in April anymore, or that the tiny creek in her backyard had turned into a trickle instead of a torrent. She could smell change, but she couldn't understand it. That was dangerous, and I knew trouble was coming when she showed up uninvited at my fence line, wearing white jeans, espadrilles, and an expression like she just licked a lemon rind. "I'm here about the structure," she said, gesturing vaguely in the direction of the dam, which wasn't even visible from where she stood. "It's not in harmony with the natural aesthetic of the neighborhood." I replied calmly that my land wasn't in the neighborhood. I wasn't under HOA jurisdiction, and I had permits, plural, approved by the county, the water district, and the Office of Soil Drainage. "I'm afraid it's still a safety concern," she said, eyes narrowing. "If there's no water there, what are you even trying to hold back? You built something that doesn't need to exist, and that makes it suspicious." That word, suspicious, hung in the air like smoke. Over the next month, I received not 1, not 2, but 17 violation notices from the HOA, each more absurd than the last. Unauthorized earthwork, unsanctioned water containment, visual disruption to neighborhood symmetry. I wasn't even a dues-paying member, and yet they fined me $300 for causing hydrological confusion. I framed that one. Then came the letters threatening to report me to county code enforcement, the EPA, even FEMA. I sent back certified responses with photocopies of every approval document annotated in red. That's when the flyers started showing up. Printed bulletins left in every mailbox in Oak Hollow. Warning of the shadow reservoir on private land. The unregulated body of water being used without consent. They made it sound like I was about to summon Moses and part the damn thing. Down Main Street. I could have sued for defamation, but I didn't. I waited. I installed trail cams. I kept records. And I kept the gate on the dam locked with a chain I welded shut. Then one weekend, I had to leave town. My cousin got married in Montana and I didn't want to miss it. Before I left, I did my rounds, checked the spillways, reinforced the retaining edge with gravel, and made sure the secondary runoff pipe was clear. I even left a note on the trailhead that said, "Private property, do not trespass. Structure monitored by cameras." I was gone for 48 hours. When I got back, the air felt off. You know that feeling when you open your fridge and can't quite place the smell, but you know something died? That's what it felt like walking toward the hill. The silence was too loud. My boots crunched gravel on the slope, and as I crested the ridge, my stomach dropped into my knees. The dam was gone, bulldozed, leveled like it had never existed. All that remained was a gash in the earth, a pile of broken stone, and a single twisted piece of the sluice gate jammed upright in the mud like a tombstone. There were tire tracks leading back into the HOA development, wide ones, construction vehicle. Wide. I stood there for a full 5 minutes, mouth dry, ears ringing, and then I saw it. A laminated sign posted on a stake, fluttering in the wind, like a cheap plastic flag. It read, "Removal of unauthorized structure, pursuant to Section 8.3 of the Oak Hollow Estates Covenant." There were no signatures, no date, just an HOA letterhead and a list of board-approved action items. My face burned. I wanted to scream, but instead I turned on my heel and walked to the nearest trail cam. Gone. Ripped from the tree. Mounting, bracket left dangling like a broken limb. I moved to the second one. Same thing. Third one smashed with a rock. But I had backups. Redundant micro-recorders tucked inside the dam's control box. And what they captured made my blood run cold. The footage showed 2 men in orange vests, no visible company logos, cutting the chain on the sluice gate with bolt cutters. Minutes later, a rented bobcat rumbled into frame and started ramming the base of the dam. Karen stood nearby, wearing her HOA badge like a deputy, barking instructions and sipping iced coffee. "Clear it all. This place is an eyesore," she said, on the tape. "If he wanted to build a reservoir, he should have asked us first. Ask them. This was my land, my permits, my work, and she treated it like a rogue garden gnome." I uploaded the footage to a flash drive, printed the permit packet again, and drove straight to the county offices. Over the next few days, I filed reports. I contacted my water engineer. I had the site surveyed, damage assessed. Restoration estimates totaled over $42,000. And that wasn't counting the ecological impact or the downstream liability. Because here's the thing. The dam wasn't just a pond. It was a buffer. It was a safeguard. It held back 170,000 gallons of potential flood water from pouring downhill into a subdivision built on clay-heavy soil with 1980s French drains and no retention walls. And monsoon season was just 2 weeks away. It started with a drizzle, as it always does, the kind that taps on your windows like an old friend, whispering promises of coffee and quiet mornings. But I knew better. I'd been watching the weather patterns, following the NOAA satellite data like a hawk, and I could tell this wasn't going to be a normal rain. A warm front from the Gulf had collided with a stalled cold system over our valley, and the model showed a 7-day corridor of constant precipitation, a once-every-decade kind of storm. And this time the dam wasn't there to take the hit. My fingers drummed against the kitchen table as the rain picked up speed, bouncing off the tin awning outside like machine gun fire. It had been 6 days since I discovered the dam demolished. And despite filing police reports, environmental violation notices, and county code complaints, nothing had moved. Not a fine, not a citation. The county engineer's office gave me a weak apology and a referral to small claims court. Meanwhile, the HOA had gone radio silent. No response to certified letters, no explanation for their illegal demolition, just a smug silence behind freshly power-washed fences and perfectly symmetrical hedges. I sat by the window and watched the clouds roll in like an army. By the second day, the soil was already saturated. By the third, my gravel path had turned to oatmeal. I walked the ridge every morning, raincoat on, boots sinking into the slurry that used to be my trail. Water pooled in places it never had before, filling the low spots left by the bulldozer that gutted the dam basin. I'd installed temporary berms to slow runoff, but they weren't meant for this volume. Without the dam's retention pool to slow it all down, every drop that hit my hillside was now barreling straight down into Oak Hollow Estates, an HOA community that, according to its own newsletters, prided itself on elegant drainage solutions and shared responsibility. I almost felt bad. Almost on the fourth night at precisely 2:37 a.m. it happened. A deep, wet crack echoed through the darkness like a tree snapping in a storm. I shot out of bed, heart pounding, and ran to the window. Even through the downpour, I could hear the low roar of moving earth. I threw on my boots and a flashlight and stumbled out into the mud. And there, down the ridge, I saw it. Water. Not trickling, not pooling, charging. a full-blown cascading sheet of brown churning liquid tearing through the upper edge of the HOA boundary, like a mudslide in a Hollywood disaster movie. I sprinted to the overlook, and what I saw made me stop cold. The retaining wall behind Karen's cul-de-sac, built from faux stone and arrogance, had sheared clean off at the base. A 30-foot chunk now lay halfway down the slope, shattered like a dropped plate. Behind it, her pristine backyard, once home to a gazebo and koi pond, was now a sludge pit with patio chairs bobbing like forgotten pool toys. The street below was worse. Water had overtaken the main road, sweeping mulch, trash bins, and God knows what else down the asphalt river. Driveways were flooded, cars submerged up to their side mirrors. I watched a decorative garden gnome get launched like a torpedo into someone's front window. It would have been funny if it weren't so damn biblical. I ran back inside and grabbed my camera, documenting everything. I filmed the breach, the runoff, the buckling sidewalks and burst drainage grates. And then I filmed the "for sale" sign, floating down the hill like it was riding a lazy river. By sunrise, the place looked like a war zone. Emergency services arrived just as the sun pierced the cloud cover, casting a golden glow on absolute suburban carnage. Karen was out on her lawn in a pink robe, screaming into her phone as two firefighters waded through her front yard with a rubber raft. Her hydrangeas were underwater, her mailbox was gone, and her eyes locked with mine across the floodplain with the intensity of someone who just realized they'd picked the wrong enemy. I waved. That afternoon, while the HOA board huddled in the community center trying to assess damages and coordinate cleanup, something even better happened. The county emergency manager showed up with a clipboard and a pair of yellow boots. She surveyed the area with the grim efficiency of someone used to disaster zones, not luxury townhomes, and then she did something I didn't expect. She hiked straight up the ridge and knocked on my door. "Mr. Allen?" she asked, wiping rain from her glasses. "You the property owner at Parcel 83B?" I nodded, cautious. "You had a private retention structure on this slope, correct?" I led her inside and showed her the footage. Before and after shots of the dam, the permits, the blueprints, the documentation, the drone scans, and the video of the HOA's unauthorized demolition. She didn't say much, just took notes, a lot of them. "This runoff event triggered a floodplain reclassification," she finally said, closing her notebook. "That means insurance premiums, infrastructure retrofits, environmental remediation. Big money. Big liability." I tilted my head. "You think the HOA is liable?" She looked up. "Oh, they're already blaming you." My eyebrows shot up. "Me?" "Yep," she said flatly. "Filed a preliminary complaint with the county this morning stating that you removed a critical stormwater barrier without board approval, resulting in catastrophic community damage." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. "That was my dam on my land with my permits." "I know," she said, flipping a page. "And that's why this just got interesting." Within 24 hours, the narrative had shifted entirely. Emails. Went out accusing me of unauthorized alteration of landform features, and Karen posted a long-winded, typo-filled rant on the Nextdoor app, calling me a reckless hydrologist wannabe who endangered our community for personal gain. My name trended on the neighborhood Facebook page. They called me Damn Man like I was some sort of wetland vigilante. But here's where it got delicious. By trying to pin the blame on me, the HOA had inadvertently admitted that the dam's removal had caused the flood damage. That was legal dynamite. Because if they claimed it was the lack of dam that did the damage, then they'd effectively admitted that the dam had been necessary, which made its removal without due process, consent, or legal authority not just a mistake, but willful negligence. Their own words were becoming the rope with which they'd hang themselves. I uploaded everything to the cloud and sent copies to my attorney. She was already prepping a countersuit. Meanwhile, the residents of Oak Hollow were starting to wake up. A crowd formed at the community center when they learned that the HOA might be the reason their basements were now indoor pools. One guy, a quiet mortgage broker named Vince, stood up and demanded to know why the board had authorized land alteration measures without a vote. Karen tried to talk around it, but it was clear the tide had turned. The residents were mad. Their homes were soaked. Their insurance companies were asking questions. And Karen? Karen looked like someone trying to hold back a flood with a rake. The storm had passed, but the reckoning had just begun. They filed the lawsuit exactly 9 days after the flood. Certified letter, hand-delivered, tucked into a stiff folder with gold-embossed lettering like it was a wedding invitation instead of a declaration of war. The Oak Hollow Estates Homeowners Association, by and through their counsel, was suing me for gross negligence, willful property damage, and reckless modification of terrain leading to catastrophic community loss. I read the packet 3 times, standing barefoot in my kitchen, the sound of rain still dripping from the gutters outside like an encore from hell. They were blaming me for the flood. Me. The one person who'd spent 3 years engineering a solution to the very problem they had just unleashed with bulldozers and ego. According to their legal fantasy novel, I had abandoned my retention structure, allowed it to deteriorate, and then intentionally removed it without notifying the proper authorities, resulting in uncontrolled watershed release. They even included cherry-picked satellite screenshots after they had leveled the dam as proof of my non-compliance. They had no idea what was coming. I called my attorney, Sarah, same woman who helped me file the original dam permits. And she laughed so hard I thought she was going to choke on her coffee. "They're suing you," she said. "This is a gift. I haven't seen malpractice this bold since that time a zoning board built a dog park over a buried septic system." I met with her the next morning. We spread everything out on her massive oak conference table. The permits, stamped by 3 separate agencies. The engineering diagrams, signed off by a licensed hydrologist. The land surveys with topographical overlays. And the photos, dozens of them. I had before and after drone footage, trail cam stills, time-stamped video of the HOA contractors cutting the chain on the sluice gate, even audio of Karen saying, "Clear it all. This place is an eyesore." The pièce de résistance, a thermal drone pass from 3 weeks prior, showing the water distribution gradient and runoff patterns with the dam intact. Sarah stared at it like it was the Mona Lisa. "We're not just going to fight this," she said, eyes gleaming. "We're going to bury them in it." So, we filed a countersuit. Cross-complaint, actually. We alleged illegal demolition of a permitted structure, trespassing, destruction of private infrastructure, violation of local floodplain management regulations, and most importantly, interference with an engineered water control system during an active hydrological risk season. We sent subpoenas to the contractors who operated the bulldozer. Turns out they were a landscaping crew hired off Craigslist for cash. They had no licenses, no insurance, and claimed they were told by Karen it was a decorative berm. One of them testified under oath that he'd asked, "Shouldn't we get the homeowner's approval first?" and was told, "He doesn't live here. He'll thank us later." The court date was set for 3 weeks out. The HOA, to their credit, doubled down. They held an emergency meeting where Karen told residents I was attempting to extort the community with bogus science and revenge lawsuits. She framed it like I had removed the dam to punish them. But more and more homeowners were starting to talk. Insurance adjusters were circling like vultures. 6 houses had been declared temporarily uninhabitable. Mold had already started growing in drywall. 1 family had to live in a motel. The premiums were rising, and fast. Then came the kicker. The County Flood Control Board released an official statement after conducting an independent review of the incident. It confirmed, in very dry, bureaucratic language, that the removal of the private retention structure materially contributed to the severity of the flooding experienced by residents in the Oak Hollow Estates development. Translation: the dam mattered, and it wasn't me who removed it. That finding didn't just validate my countersuit. It opened the door to something much bigger: liability. Karen and her cronies had authorized the removal of a registered flood mitigation structure without a court order or county notification. That's not just civil overreach. That's borderline criminal negligence. We walked into court a month later dressed like we were going to a funeral. Because we were. Theirs. Their attorney tried to paint me as a rogue landowner with a god complex, someone who had engineered a dam for ego, not safety, and then willfully dismantled it during the most hydrologically volatile month of the year. But Sarah was ready. She played the drone footage on a giant screen for the jury, showing the dam intact one week, gone the next, followed by sweeping footage of the mudslide that ripped through Karen's backyard like a bulldozer made of soup. Then she passed around laminated copies of my permits, highlighted, dated, signed. Then came the kicker, a copy of the HOA's own minutes from the meeting where they authorized the demolition. Someone on the board, bless them, had included the phrase, "Take care of the dam issue while he's gone," in the summary. The courtroom went dead silent when the judge read that aloud. Karen shifted in her seat like someone sitting on a hot plate. When we brought the contractor up for cross-examination, it got even worse. "Did you have permission from the landowner to demolish the dam?" Sarah asked. "No." "Did you have any documents from the county authorizing it?" "No." "Did you tell anyone at the HOA that you didn't think it was legal?" "Yes," I told the blonde lady. "And what did she say?" He cleared his throat. "She said, and I quote, 'This whole neighborhood's on our side. He's just some loner with a hill and a grudge.'" The jury didn't even look confused. They looked pissed. Final ruling came down 2 weeks later. The judge dismissed the HOA suit in its entirety, citing lack of merit, malicious intent, and his words, "gross procedural misconduct." Then came the ruling on the countersuit. They were found liable on 4 counts: unlawful demolition, property damage, environmental code violation, and negligent contribution to municipal flooding. The HOA was ordered to pay damages: $187,000 for structural loss, $62,000 for environmental remediation, $13,000 for legal fees, and an additional $50,000 in punitive damages for good measure. I walked out of the courthouse with a check for more than I'd spent building the dam. But money wasn't the win. The win was what came next. Karen was removed as HOA president within a week. A petition circulated calling for the resignation of the entire board. 3 members stepped down, 1 moved out of state. The HOA voted to create a new oversight committee to prevent unilateral decisions. And best of all, my land was reclassified as an environmental buffer zone, untouchable by HOA regulation. No more notices, no more pink clipboards, no more laminated threats left on my gate. Just peace and gravity and water where it belonged. I never expected the end of a war to be so quiet. No gavel slam, no applause, no fireworks. Just the soft churn of backfilled dirt and the rhythmic thump of shovels as a dozen neighbors worked together to rebuild what ignorance had tried to erase. My dam. The same one the HOA once called a danger to community aesthetics rose again, stone by stone under a sky no longer threatening. This time, it wasn't just me stacking the rock wall or measuring the spillway angles. It was Vince from Lot 9, who used to ignore me at the feed store. It was Martha who lost her herb garden to the flood. It was even the Martinez twins, whose basement was still being gutted for mold, handing me rebar like it was penance. Nobody talked about the trial, not out loud, but the weight of what had happened lingered in the way people moved, in the careful deliberation of their steps. There was a shared reverence now for the land, for the water, and unexpectedly, for me. It was strange being thanked for something I'd once been cursed over, but that's how it goes in small-town America. 1 month you're the angry hillman with a doomsday bunker, and the next you're the guy who saved our foundations. Time and floodwaters have a way of clearing reputations. The county had issued its final ruling just 2 weeks earlier. Not only had the HOA lost their case and been found liable, but the judge, clearly fed up with their nonsense, had also referred them for review to the state attorney general's office. That little bonus investigation uncovered years of mismanaged dues, backdoor contractor deals, and enough bylaw violations to wallpaper a courthouse. It turned out Karen had been awarding landscaping contracts to her nephew's company at triple the market rate. The flood-friendly mulch campaign they launched last year? A scam. The Emergency Retention Basin Fund? Empty, spent on administrative meals and educational retreats. There were subpoenas, interviews, audits. I didn't need to lift a finger. The system had teeth this time, and it finally decided to bite. Karen tried to spin it, of course. Blamed the board. Blamed misunderstood intentions. At one point she claimed I hacked the HOA emails to frame her, but the receipts didn't lie, and neither did the digital trail leading straight to her PayPal account, labeled HOA Executive Consulting. Fees. The HOA was dissolved formally at the end of that month. County inspectors had declared them functionally compromised and administratively negligent. What that meant in real terms was beautiful. No more dues, no more violations, no more laminated notices about mailbox colors or yard gnomes. The power that once flowed through their bylaws now dripped uselessly into a pile of revoked charters and unpaid legal bills. And speaking of unpaid bills, those didn't vanish when the HOA did. The civil court held board members personally liable for the damages not covered by insurance or the HOA's defunct budget. Karen, Richard, and 2 other members were ordered to pay a combined restitution package totaling $210,000. Karen appealed, twice, lost both. By the time it was over, she'd mortgaged her home, drained her savings, and put her precious BMW up for private auction just to stay afloat. It wasn't enough. A month after the judgment, a for sale sign appeared on her front lawn, and not a quiet, dignified one. No, it was one of those bright orange, motivated seller as-is signs that scream desperation louder than a fire alarm. She got maybe 40% of what the house had appraised for last year. Rumor was she took a job in some flat suburb outside Tulsa. Last I heard, she was moderating a Facebook group about HOA-free living and complaining about squirrels. As for me, I rebuilt. Not just the dam, but the trust. I hosted a cookout during the first dry weekend after the final retaining wall went in. People showed up with casseroles, coolers, and apologies. We sat on folding chairs around the ridge and looked down into the valley. Quiet now. Peaceful. You could still see faint outlines of where the flood had carved its way through the streets, patches of new concrete, mismatched siding, grass growing back in odd little whirls. But nature heals. So do people, if you give them reason to. A few days later, I installed the new sign. I bolted it into a thick post just beside the spillway, where the runoff trickled calmly into the downstream culvert. Simple aluminum plaque, weatherproofed black letters on silver background. It read, "Next time, ask the guy who understands gravity." Below it, in smaller font, I added the dam specs, drainage capacity, and the county permit number. No ego, just fact. The flood made believers out of all of them. Even the HOA diehards who never admitted they were wrong started walking their dogs past the dam with subtle nods and tighter leashes. One even left me a thank you note. No name, just, "You were right. We're sorry." Now, every time the clouds gather and the forecast calls for storms, I sleep just fine. Not because I trust the weather, but because I trust what I built and who I built it with. There's something poetic in that. This little patch of land, once a battleground of pettiness and paperwork, now breathes easy again. The creek flows. The soil holds, the frogs are back, and so are the kids splashing in the shallows like nothing ever happened. But they remember. And sometimes when the wind blows just right, carrying the scent of rain and fresh earth up from the valley, I swear I can hear it. A faint, distant murmur. The collective sigh of a neighborhood finally understanding the power of water and the cost of ignoring the man who knew how to tame it. They built their houses on a floodplain. I built my life on a hill and a dam. And in the end, the hill held, and the dam, once destroyed, proved its worth by its absence. The true power wasn't in the structure itself, but in the knowledge behind it. And that, unlike concrete or covenants, is something you can't bulldoze.